Simon. I'm pretty excited via the amount of Instagram posts that I've put out. I'm pretty excited to be speaking to you because I find you a very interesting guy and very inspirational guy. So, firstly, thank you so much for giving up some time to talk with me. I'm honoured.
Absolute pleasure, mate. You've been selling it very well.
Yeah, I've got a good team behind me. I'm sure we'll talk about social media a little bit tonight. But obviously, you've done a fair bit of live TV in your time. How does this compare, knowing that there might be dozens of people listening?
I feel very relaxed, really, because it's a weird thing just being on telly or anything involves a camera. Is of course you don't see what's beyond it. You might see numbers, or if you're doing the football, you may get told later on through the week, how many people were watching and stuff. But you never really think about it at the time. Yeah. You just treat. I was told this when I got the job on Blue Peter many, many, many years ago. One of the pieces of advice they gave us, particularly when it came to the audition, was treat the camera like you're speaking to someone else. You're speaking to a friend or something. Forget about the fact that there's lots of people behind it watching and listening in. Just treat it like a friend. So I don't really tend to think about what's beyond it, how many people might be watching, because to be honest, mate, as soon as you start going down that line, it messes you around.
Yeah, well, I haven't got to worry too much about that yet. I'm still on a very small scale, but it's strange because I can have some of my deepest conversations via podcast on public. Privately, I'm quite a private guy. I'm quite quiet, but when the podcast is on, I speak about quite difficult issues and difficult topics that most people would be terrified to speak about in private.
Yeah.
It's a bit of a strange kind of reasoning behind it. I'm not sure why. It just flows, and it just seems natural to discuss these kind of topics: mental health, challenge, obstacles. Obviously, we did the event together, so we were both standing on stage declaring struggles. It's a strange thing to do, isn't it? To tell people the shit you're going through that you don't even know.
Yeah, it is, and I think doing stuff publicly or going in front of a camera or a microphone does different things to different people. Some people, they just come to life in front of a camera or microphone. They're able to speak far more eloquently than they can normally. And then you have other people who speak very eloquently one-on-one or with a group of people around a dinner table, stick them in front of a camera and they cannot express themselves. They can't string a sentence together. So it does different things to different people. And, some of the best comedians we've seen or rock stars, whoever it might be, are often quite quiet, shy people, but you give them a stage, you give them a platform, you give them a camera, whatever it might be, they almost inhabit a different space. So I'm a bit like you. I can talk more eloquently and probably openly doing something like this about mental health, whatever it might be, than often I can if I'm just trying to speak to someone one-on-one.
Yeah, and I find writing difficult for that reason. So me and you are obviously going to have dialogue, we're going to have conversation. Who knows where it will go? We'll feed off each other's energy. When you're writing, like, you've got the blank white of a page, and it's really hard to articulate what you're thinking. And I find writing the most difficult form of expression. That's why, again, your book I thought was just fantastic. How you talked about such difficult subjects, but it was beautifully written. I don't know if you can relate to that. It's like when it's a blank page, it's hard to conjure up what's in you and dump it out there.
Yeah, it is. And I've had a few people say you're going to write another book, and I keep saying, well, I've got to find something to write about first of all, because that was kind of my rocket fuel when I was writing it, is that I had a story to tell, an experience that I'd gone through that I could put down on paper. But at the moment, I sort of think about potential things I could write about, and there's nothing really lighting the kind of fuel at the moment, giving me that kind of burning desire to start writing again. And I think when you've got something that you really want to get across and you want to explain and you want to talk about and unpack, I found writing just such an amazing way to do it. You've got to have something in here, something in your heart or your head that really fires you, and then that will help you write. And at the moment, I don't really have that. So if you were saying, right, start writing some kind of book at the moment, I would struggle because I haven't got something fueling me at the moment. But when I did, I found, not the easiest subject to write about naturally, but I did find that, I could just write and write and write. It wasn't really a problem.
Yeah, that came across. It felt like it was a naturally written book, but it kind of left me wanting more now. Like, I want to know now how things are, I guess, and I guess that's a sign of a good book as well. It's like yeah, I think it left me wanting to know more. And I guess that's where I've got some of my questions from tonight. Reading the book, I'm like, oh, I want to know more about this. I want to know more about that. So we'll start with Carrow Road, if that's all right. Have you managed to get yourself down there this season?
No, not yet. No, I did. Well, I did a Norwich game for Amazon last week, Amazon Prime, but that was at St James's Park. So I haven't been to Carrow Road yet this season. It's the problem with living down in Buckinghamshire, being 2.5, 3 hours away, is that I don't get to go and see them that often. But I have to go. I've got to go and see them as a punter, not just someone working on them. But it will happen, Alex, this season. But I just don't know when.
Yeah, they're doing all right. I've just checked the form. They've had 2 wins in the last 5. I know they had back-to-back wins, which was like a bus. They were waiting for 1 and then 2.
It couldn't get much worse. We didn't win in our first 10 games. We had a shocking start, so it did pick up for a bit, but we sadly lost again at the weekend. So yeah, we've got Manchester United next. So it's not looking great. We're back to the bottom of the table, and they've got a new man in charge and some fairly tasty players.
Yeah, I think you're going to get thumped. I know, but United new manager, they'll all start turning up and playing now. I'm a Coventry fan, so we've just found out the playoffs. Yeah, but I'm kind of like, part of me doesn't want to get promoted because I just think we would get walloped every single week. It's such a hard jump from Championship to Premier League. It's incredibly tough, especially like we're tight on money. Coventry, we haven't got much cash to spend, but we're doing good. I'm pleased.
Well, this is a debate we have every time we go up, and we have gone up a few times over the last few seasons, and that is for clubs of our size and our kind of financial muscle, which compared to a lot of the big boys in the Premier League is a fairly small muscle. The joy and the ride of getting to the Premier League is starkly different to the reality of being there, because you go from a season where you're going into every game, pretty much expecting to win, or at the very least not losing, and you're going to put this run together that will see you eventually promoted, like we were last season, like we were 2 seasons ago. Then you get to the Premier League and your expectations are totally different, and you will find fans, I'm sure you'll have found these at your club, who will actually argue, I'd rather not get promoted. I mean, yeah, we all want that moment of promotion that just fires you off and fills you with joy and happiness and all those kind of things, but then the reality when the next season starts is so different to the ride of getting there.
Yeah, well, I'm a bit of a pessimist when it comes to my team. Unfortunately, I'm not one of these who thinks we're going to ever do well. It's just, it's just.
Well, you've had quite a lot of rough years off the back of each other, so I'm not surprised.
Yeah, we have, but we've had a good run. We've had a good few years. We've had a lot of success. We've been to Wembley. We've won things. We've got promotions. It's the most success we've had, but that came off the back of a lot of failure. So it's kind of like it's been a decent time for us. But I struggle to enjoy the game. I just sit there too nervous. So I mean, I wanted to talk to you about this because it was something that you mentioned in your book about. I think like when you spend your time, like I read a lot of serious books. I do a lot of serious work, and I struggle now to relate to football as much as I used to, because I think when you start to question things, as you get older in life, you start to question, where you're going, what you're doing, your goals, your ambitions. Like football has just, for me personally, become a little less important. And I struggle now to understand how people can get so up for a football game, especially when I see some of my friends, if their team loses, their weekends, like it's a write-off, they're down in the dumps. And I can't go there anymore. I don't really get too much enjoyment. If I'm there, I'm nervous. I don't really actually enjoy it. And then I thought, you know what? I just don't know if I can make time for the football anymore like I used to. Well, I know I can't because I don't go up.
I mean, there are some fans who it literally, it leaves them in a bad place for a few days when they lose. And I remember when I was younger feeling that a little bit, particularly with England. I remember the 1990 World Cup, going out to West Germany. I remember the Euro 1996, Germany again, penalties again. And that really affected me. I was so upset. I remember riding on my bike after the 1990 semi-final and thumping a lamppost. I was angry, upset. It left me feeling really rubbish for days. But I'm not really kind of like that anymore. I'll get over it in a few hours. In fact, anything sporting-wise. Initially, when I woke up this morning, I didn't stay up to watch it. And I checked the phone to see what had happened in the Ashes, the first test of the Gabba. And first thing I see is we've been skittled out for 147. Now, back in the day, that would have left me being a bit grouchy for the first part of the morning. But I was like, look, it's not a great start, but I'm not going to let it ruin my day. But for some people, it's the be all and end all, and partners suffer because for a couple of days they're just in a foul mood. It means different things to different people, but I'm able to kind of, when a defeat happens, park it and go.
I always say that I don't care, and then when I'm there, like you've got 20,000 people around. You feel really part of it. It's hard not to get involved, and then you see the away fans, and you start thinking, "No, shut up, away fans! You know, we want this more than you." And then you get in that competitive mode, and I think there's a little bit of you as well. Like, you know, the 11 players on your team, they're like your heroes. You know, as a young boy, it was always wanting to dream about, you know, going onto the pitch and playing. So I think there's a bit of that, you know, the cultural, you know, being part of the tribe, and then the hero worship of the players. It just all engulfs, and it can be a pretty special day. And when your team wins, it's, you know, you are flying high. It's a great feeling when that ball hits the net and you're uproaring. I can see why people get addicted to that feeling. I think it's the best part of their week. You know, it's jubilation, it's celebration, and sometimes people don't get that through the week.
No, and that's why I think football's really, really important in this period. Actually, sport as a whole. That's why I think it's really important that it kept going through the lockdowns and through the pandemic. Obviously, had to stop for a little bit, and the fans weren't there, so it was a very different experience watching it, and certainly working on it was a very odd experience. But it was really important because sport should be a release. It should be something that takes us away from whatever's going on in life. Whether it's work pressures, relationship pressures, whatever it might be. It's supposed to be a release. It's supposed to take us somewhere else, and for a few hours on a Saturday afternoon or midweek and wherever it may be, we can just get away from the rest of the stuff in life and just enjoy football. And it may bring us enjoyment, it may bring us, you know, frustration, disappointment, whatever it might be, but at least it's not all the other stuff. And it's just, you know, it's so important to a lot of people. But bottom line, it should be fun as well. It should be fun as well.
Yeah, I think we forget that sometimes. But yeah, you're right. It you know, how many times has it brought the nation together? A lot of times. It's good, you know. It's the one of few times that we actually all come together and so on. So speaking about teams and clubs, I really want to ask you about the Bacon Boys.
The Bacon Boys.
Yeah, are the Bacon Boys still together?
Well, I don't know. They might be in Reading. I'm not sure, but because I've moved now. I'm in Buckinghamshire. Right. So basically, it was a group of guys. I'm a Christian, a man of faith, and I was part of a church in Reading. And you know, I've always been quite passionate about kind of men's stuff, of kind of doing stuff for men and with men in terms of supporting each other, and trying to get to a stage with them where we can, you know, have permission amongst each others to be able to talk about stuff that probably normally in a pub conversation you wouldn't necessarily talk about. And I'd seen over the years just this kind of same pattern happening with a lot of guys at this church I was part of, and actually seeing it in other places as well, where, you know, life just throws us different challenges at different times, Alex. You know that, you know, and there can be moments where we're kind of cruising along and everything's fairly good, and then, you know, a curveball comes at us. It might be a redundancy, it might be a relationship that falls apart, whatever it might be. And I would often see guys within the church I was at who were going through some difficult things begin to kind of switch off from things, and then begin to kind of switch off from friends, then begin to kind of isolate as they were dealing with whatever they're dealing with. And I think of two guys in our church, both who lost their jobs. So really challenging time. It was putting their marriages through the mill. You know, there were huge amounts of anxieties about providing, you know, just the standard of living their kids have become accustomed to. And these guys over time, I just saw kind of face change, disengaging from stuff, disengaging from friends, and actually then disengaging from their wives. And they just kind of withdrew to a place of isolation. And I imagine in the work that you do, mate, you'll have heard that expression, lone wolf, where guys go and deal with stuff alone and they don't push into the support of other guys, mainly because we're just, as guys, we're not programmed to be very good at being open and honest about how we're feeling. And we're not always that good at being equipped enough to be able to listen and to hear the difficult stuff. We like to do the surface stuff. How you doing? Yeah, I'm all right. Not bad, thanks. How things? Yeah, work's been a bit rubbish recently. Kids are okay. Things are all right at home. You know, just very, very surface. And so I just wanted to set up this men's group. We used to meet Friday mornings in Reading, 6:30 in the morning. So catch the guys before they go to work. And we just meet in Pret a Manger, and we would just sit there, chat. Someone would occasionally share a word for the day, and we just have like an hour together. And what I found, mate, is that it takes time with guys. It takes investment of time before you get beyond that surface stuff I was just mentioning, before you get to a place where someone feels the permission to kind of be a little bit more open. I remember the moment everything changed, and we'd been rattling along for a little bit, and it was good. It was nice to hang out with them. It was a nice way to start a Friday. And this guy called Hugo, who's frightfully well-to-do, very wealthy Hugo, wife and a couple of kids, and he just sat there one morning. He was a bit quiet, and I sort of went round him and saying, "How you doing? Is there anything we can talk about? Anything you want prayer for, or whatever it might be?" And he just went, "Guys, I'm just really just struggling with porn at the moment." And there was this kind of collective silence. It was like, "Oh gosh, we weren't quite expecting this, least of all from Hugo." And there was a momentary pause and a little bit of awkwardness. But actually, Alex, what that moment did is that it kind of gave everyone else permission, in that we didn't suddenly start all putting our hands up saying, "Yeah, I watch too much porn," or whatever it might be. But actually, it kind of opened the gates, so that on that day, we started going to, more in-depth levels of engaging with each other, of talking about some of the things we were facing in life, and actually being that thing that as guys we're not very good in doing, and that's being vulnerable. Because you'll have seen my stuff, and I know that loads of others talk about this, is that vulnerability too often in our society, particularly when it comes to men, is seen as a dirty word. It's an admission of weakness, whereas I always see it actually as an admission of strength. If you're able to be vulnerable enough to say, "Do you know what? Today I'm struggling. Today I'm facing this, and I don't know what to do." That to me is strength, and that's what that group became about, which was guys just kind of doing life together once a week, supporting each other, and getting to that place eventually where we were vulnerable enough on the days where we did feel that way to say, "Do you know what, guys, this morning, I'm going to be honest enough to say I'm having a really shit time. And this is why."
Were these all guys from the church then, Si? Were they?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's the same in so many different areas, whether it's work, or it's social clubs, or it's sport, whatever it might be, where kind of blokes meet together. We're just not very good at kind of supporting each other a lot of the time.
No, and they all say that the deep stuff that you're talking about will come after a certain amount of banter, a certain amount of bonding, and it's always good to get through that. That's why through training, I like the gym, because often guys have lifted the weights or whatever, they start to relax a little bit, or even some of the best mentoring comes after a beer or something like that, where the wall, I always find if you tell a guy we're going to meet, I'm going to talk, it's like, "Whoa, talk about what?" Yeah. No, I'm not doing that. But yeah, there's layers to break down, and I think guys traditionally are pretty poor at this. But it's getting guys into that situation, isn't it?
Yeah, and you've got to invest time in these things. I think we live in such an instantaneous world where everything happens like that we kind of want. Okay, we want to support our mates more. We want to be more accountable or open and honest, and we want it like that. And it doesn't often happen like that. So I'd imagine, within the gym, when you're there and you're talking to guys, you have to invest time in them. You've got to make connections with them. You can't just expect. Listen, there might be an occasional guy who'll just open up straight away and will just be honest enough to say that this is where I'm at the moment. Well, anything you suggest, but a lot won't. You need to earn their trust and their respect. That takes time, and we're not very good always in this society we live in, where everything's done at 100 miles an hour, of investing that time.
Yeah, I think that's what what you do and what I do is so important, because I think people relate far more with struggle than they do success. So, because everybody looks successful on social medias.
Yeah,
of course. So, I do it. I'm guilty of it. I don't put out my worst pictures. I'm terrible. I'm very insecure. I'm a personal trainer. I want to look good. So, I'll take a few pictures, and guess what? I'll put on the best one. It's simple as that. So I try and get this balance of, I share the struggle a lot, and I think guys relate to that. So in the Bacon Boys Club, what would you say was the most common themed struggle that most men were dealing with? Is it just the opening up to their partners? Is it anything in particular? Did you pick up on anything that was like a common theme for the guys?
Insecurity would definitely be one of them. That I felt was a big one, in that we can put on a confident exterior and make out everything's okay. That comes back to what you say about social media. We can present a very secure image, but often we read between the lines when people are posting stuff and say, that person actually doesn't strike me as a hugely secure person. Look at the amount of layers they've had to put on a post or a picture, whatever it is, to kind of keep the world at bay from their true self, actually who they actually do represent. And found that, you know, hugely with guys who are just very insecure, worried about, you know, being the best dad, worried about whether they were being a good enough husband or partner, worried about, you know, work, and the worry that they weren't going to get that promotion or even keep their job. Just this conveyor belt of kind of insecurity that we don't want to admit to. We don't want to kind of say, this is how I'm feeling. I'm actually not hugely secure in what I'm doing at the moment, work-wise. That was what I found more than anything. And also just that kind of, that inability to be really honest. We like to put up a front, you know, and that's one of the biggest things we see on social media. We can put up whatever front we choose on whatever day. You know, we've now, Alex, you know this. I'm not, by the way, suggesting you do it, but we've got to the stage now where a few years ago, if people had started putting up filtered photos, they'd have had the mick royally taken out of them. You know, I remember when I was growing up, to be caught by your peers at school looking in the mirror and playing with your hair was the biggest embarrassment you could go through, pretty much. You know, you would have the mick taken out of you. What are you doing? Flipping, look at you. Lots of inappropriate names coming your way. Now it's fine. You see guys grooming themselves very openly, whether it's at a club or a pub or a, you know, sports changing room, wherever it might be. And we now have entered a period where we're just used to seeing people looking airbrushed and amazing. It's become available to everyone. There are numerous apps that will change. And we don't even challenge it anymore. It's just like, wow, don't you look amazing, or whatever it might be. And so we can put on these sort of multifaceted fronts all the time. And I found that a lot of the guys, they put on these fronts. And that's why, as I was saying earlier, it took a long while to sort of chip away at them and basically get to the real guy, actually what this guy was really about, what motivates him, what keeps him awake at night, what are his, you know, what are the things he loves in life, what are the things that fires him, what are the things that frightens him, all these kind of things. It's really difficult to get there, which is why, come back to what I said earlier, that's where the investment of time pays off.
It's super difficult, yeah. And I think one of the biggest challenges, I'm not sure everybody knows that they've got this front. Like, you know, we get carried away in the culture, society, like, you know, we get conditioned, we get brought up, our values are handed to us. So there's a bit of work to be done. And I find it's usually kind of mid to late 30s, maybe early 40s, that guys slow down a bit and start to go, well, who the fuck am I? You know, if I if I don't have my job, then who am I? You know, if I don't have my house and my car, like when I'm left with me, like, who am I then? And I think there's one, being aware of that. And then there's two, there's going to work on finding out who the true self is. Because that's scary, you know, because the true self is both ugly and beautiful. It's, you know, it's got some pleasantries and some not so pleasant things. We've got, you know, all these things to discover. But I think you often have to go to the places that you least want to go to get the answers that you most want.
Yeah, true.
So, yeah, that's a challenge. I think guys get to a certain point, and it's usually back off point. And I think that's where these groups can come in real handy, because if you can do it as a bit of a unit, and like you say, all it takes is sometimes one guy to lead the line and be brave and be courageous and open up and share some of his ugliest, darkest thoughts, because we all have them.
Yeah.
We all have them. We don't like sharing them, and they scare ourselves, let alone to express publicly. I think, yeah, the more honest you can get on that, I think that's one thing to do. I don't think it changes anything though, because I think there needs to be some action backed onto this, right?
Yeah, totally. You just because someone's been open about something and expressed a fear or whatever it might be, doesn't suddenly mean everything's changed. But you kind of got a starting point to then begin to unpack it with them and spend time with them, and, you know, maybe, you know, over a beer or whatever it might be, just talk to them more about it. It's purely a starting point, but it's a huge starting point, because most people never get to that starting point. It just remains surface, and you never really get to know the actual guy behind the mask.
Yeah. So where do you feel like you are on this journey then, Si, in this self-discovery? Because I'm guessing it's a never-ending journey for us all, right? So, like, what are you doing currently, like daily routines, daily habits, just to ensure that you stay in a good place, and that life is manageable, and that you're somewhere near your best? Like, what kind of things do you do?
It's a really good question, mate. I mean, it's not something I always get right, not something I do every day, but I I just try and be more self-aware about why I'm feeling maybe the way I'm feeling on any given day. So if I wake up and I feel a sense of anxiety about something, rather than just dismiss it or try and pretend it's not happening, I try and understand why it's happening, what's maybe triggering it. I find that at the moment, routine's really important for me because I don't have regular work at the moment. That's been a really tough battle for me in terms of my identity. A few years ago, it wasn't that long ago, my identity was, in terms of my work, was being a Sky Sports presenter, and I've done it for 11 years, and I was a Premier League presenter. And when those inevitable questions come, when you meet a new person, the second question pretty much every time after "what's your name" is "what do you do?" It's not where you're from or, have you got family or whatever. It's what do you do? And so a lot of my identity, and for all of us, our identities are often in what we do. That's a big part of who we are. And that's something that I've been wrestling with for the last few months, occasionally waking up and going, well, what is my purpose today? I haven't got anything in the diary in terms of work. So how do I make today count? How do I, use today? How do I make sure I just don't wind it away doing absolutely nothing of any use? My kind of relationship with exercise kind of comes and goes. I have periods where I'm really into it again, and I just know the benefits of it. I know how it makes me feel. It makes me feel able that I can tackle stuff and deal with stuff. It puts my head in a much better space. And then I just have periods, a bit like I'm in now, if I'm being honest, where I've just suddenly got out the routine again. And I know, mate, when I wake up in the morning, when I go to bed tonight, I know that my day would have been a much better day had I chosen to exercise. But I'm going to be honest, I'm not going to pretend I haven't exercised today. So it's a constant thing, because I lack that routine in life that I had for so long. There are various bits in the day, like Ethan coming back from school, going to school, cooking the meals, Dorina getting home from work, whatever it might be. But in terms of my own day, I have to be really careful about how I kind of structure it, because if I don't, then I just waste time, and I hate wasting time.
What do you think it is that, with all that knowledge that you've just expressed, like, what do you think it is that stops you from not doing the exercise when we know it's the thing that potentially could make you feel better?
I don't know what it is. I was thinking about it yesterday because my wife and I were chatting about it. And listen, as they often say, if you could put all the goodness and the way that mentally exercise makes you feel, it'd be one of the most powerful drugs on earth. If you're struggling with depression, anxiety, whatever it might be, it would be an unbelievably powerful drug. So it's just such a weird one. I think so much of it is about routine and habit. When you get into a routine, it becomes so much easier. You'll know this because, stuff you post and stuff you're involved in. Once you know that the biggest battle is always just getting to the gym, or taking that first stride, or putting your shorts on to go for the run, doing up your laces on your trainers in the freezing cold. That's always the hardest bit. It's actually getting to that first bit of doing it. So, I know all that. That's the frustrating. I know this will make me feel better. It'll make me feel better about myself. I don't hang everything about myself on how I look, but for all of us, it's important. It makes us feel good about ourselves. It gives us confidence, whatever it might be. And even though I know all those things, I will have periods where it just doesn't happen. And I'm often searching for the answers to why that's happened. And I think that part of it's laziness. You just got to call it what it is. It's just being bloody lazy. And the second thing is it's just getting out of a routine and the need to restart it. But it just becomes one of those things you put off. And yet, what a stupid thing to keep putting off.
Yeah, I hear that word laziness a lot. Obviously, I speak to a lot of guys who are in a similar position. They kind of feel like they should work out or they need to work out, but they're not, and they're frustrated at themselves for not doing it. But there's areas of their lives where they're not lazy at all.
Yeah.
So they're often really hard working. Same with discipline. You hear people say, "I'm just so ill disciplined," and I always look for areas that they are. And I see it as a skill set. If you can be disciplined in one area, you can be disciplined in another. But I think what you're saying will relate with every single guy. There'll all be areas in our lives where we know if we did it, our lives would be so much better. Yours might be exercise right now. Mine might be something completely different. I'm quite lucky. Well, not lucky. I've worked really hard to get to the point where no matter what happens, I go to the gym. No matter what. I've been on some shitty days, man. Really shitty days. But I know it's the one thing that I can do that keeps me sane feeling okay. And it's a great release. In your book, you mentioned anger being quite useful if you release it. So anger is something I've always struggled with. It can bubble up quite quickly. The gym is one of the best places to put on some really crazy music, go a bit nuts, and get some anger out, because most men are angry inside. Like, we all have anger. It's something I don't think we can get rid of. But how we utilize it, I think the gym that's one of the best things it's for as well. So yeah, I don't think
I've got a mate who's I've known him for years. So we used to be in a bachelor flat many years ago, and he's been in the police for 25 odd years. And I think because after a while of being in that kind of job, lots of things begin to catch up with you. You know, in the emergency services in particular, like the armed services, you will see in the course of your career a lot of pretty awful things, and traumatic things as well. And over time that's built up. And this mate of mine struggled a lot in recent years with PTSD, is all these things that have kind of built up over time that perhaps he wasn't aware of, wasn't dealing with, have caught up with him. And he's like you, he has to go to the gym. So come rain or shine, come, you know, he's feeling rubbish, he's struggling with PTSD, or he's just really hungover, he has to go to the gym. And I really admire him for him. And I'm like, mate, it's amazing that you're able to do this. But that's his release. That is his release. And some people might just go, mate, you're just an absolute gym bunny, you're vain. And no, it's not that. Yeah, he has the benefits. Look, physically, he looks good. But it's actually here, mentally, is where it's doing him the greater good, because it helps him manage things. When he's feeling fit and strong physically, he can manage better the mental things that at times have led him to have periods off work where he's of no use to anyone.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, we're all armed with knowledge now. So I know what I'm like when I don't either go for a walk each day or do some form of training. So I'll hit the gym 4 times, maybe 5. That's enough for me. But I have to do something. And even when you said the word hangover there, I'm like, oh, like the hangovers now, like they are the worst thing. Like, they get fucking worse, I swear it. The paranoia, the depression, like everything's dark. Everything's 10 times as worse than it was the day before. But it's such an extreme, isn't it? Because like when you're drunk, like life's good. Like life, all that shit that you were worried about before has just disappeared. But then it comes back with a vengeance, doesn't it? It's like such it's a real bad habit to get into, the ups and downs of alcohol, especially if you're trying to get fit and healthy. They just don't go together. In fact, not good off their own back this year of they've knocked it on the head, and it's changed their life. And again, you've referred to this in your book as well. It can be a life changer if you can escape the habit of booze. But one thing that might help with the fitness, I mean, I don't know if you have any accountability. So basically, Simon, what I do is I nag the fuck out of people and say, are you going to the gym this week? And I think having that account, especially if it's something that you don't naturally like doing. So some people don't like the gym, and it helps to maybe find a sport that you do like. But that's where accountability comes into play a lot. So having a trainer or having someone kick your ass or call you up and go, so, you know, you said you were going gym today. What time are you going? That kind of thing. That might help. So, by the way, I'm here. If you ever need nagging, I'm a professional, mate. I can nag the shit out of you if you want to go to the gym 3 times a week.
Well, accountability is such a useful thing in lots of different areas. That's a really positive area where it can be really good. It can be very good if you are dealing with something like, you know, a drink problem that you want to kick, being accountable to someone else who you're kind of giving permission to say, what's been going on with the drinking this week, how's it going, can be a really, really useful thing. It's the important thing is finding the right person to be accountable to. But I've used accountability before in life, and I've found it, you know, when it works well, it's a really positive thing.
Absolutely. Or get yourself signed up for an event. That's another, you know, when you put your name to something and you go, in 6 months I'm going to do a marathon, or 6 months. That's the kind of thing that fear. Because I think if we can attach something that's pleasurable to it, so I'm going to look great, I'm going to feel great, and then the fear of, and I've publicly said I'm doing a marathon in 6 months. So especially with your profile, right? Like if you publicly said something, you've got like a lot of eyes on you. I could get away with it. You've got like 100,000 on Insta watching you going, you're doing a marathon. So oh, great. When are you starting training? You'd be out there running. Yeah.
Well, I've done a few marathons. I know. I know exactly what's involved. It's quite a few months of running at the wrong time of the year.
Yeah. but it will get you training, right?
Yeah, but it gets you out of bed. The idea that in a few weeks' time you're going to be trying to drag your backside around 26 miles of London.
Yeah, absolutely. It's worked for me well, and doing charity events as well. So doing charity events for me has worked brilliantly, because again, when I take people's money to raise money for good causes, I'm like, Alex, you've got to do the work now. Like, yeah, you've got to do it. It's pressure, and it's the last thing you want, but sometimes it's the thing you need. So that's worked well for me. So like, obviously in the book, which I'll show people, Love Interrupted, fantastic book, fantastic read, a tough read. Read. How's everything that you've been through affected now? When I say the word ambition, like when you experience something like you did, does it change the way that you view goals and purpose and ambition? Does it shrink your ambition down and you focus purely on the smaller things in life, or does it force you to think and act bigger?
That's a great question. I think it's a bit of all of that. I think the main thing loss does is changes. And it's an old cliche, but it kind of changes. It changes the way you view everything. I would describe it as life looking and smelling very different when that happens, because what happened to my first wife, going from diagnosis to passing away in the space of just over 3 days. If you ever wanted a stark, painful lesson in how life can suddenly change and go, there it was, and as time's gone on, you look back on it and go, my goodness me, why was I so worried about all these different things? Why did I get kind of so obsessed with wanting to do that or needing to do that? None of this really matters, but of course it does matter. Having ambition career-wise still matters. It's how you frame it, and I think it gives you a very different framing. I described it as not just having the lens on life changed, it's like the camera body's been changed as well. You're seeing life in a very different way. So I kind of see getting older now. So I'm in my late 40s, and I've got 1 or 2 friends who've now tipped over the 50 mark. And, a few years back, that was like, I just hated the idea of being that kind of age. And listen, we'd all still maintain I'd like to be a bit younger than I am. But actually, for me, I look at my life and go, do you know what? I've been very fortunate to have had 8 years more than she had. I've been very blessed to have had 4 more years alongside Ethan, my now 12-year-old boy, than his mum had. So it gives you a totally different appreciation, which is why for a time I didn't want to go back to doing live football again. It wasn't that I just thought football was rubbish all of a sudden, but for a time it didn't really matter. I needed to be passionate about it. I needed to care whether that was a penalty or not for Liverpool. I needed to care whether that was a really harsh offside situation that's just been given, against Burnley, whoever it might be. I needed to care about those things. At that stage, I didn't really care. And sometimes I do look on at people and friends and go, they're so obsessed about getting to the top of their job. Nothing wrong with that. They're so obsessed about making sure they've got, a lovely big kitchen diner and a bigger house than they've currently got. And there is always a little part of me that goes, ultimately, that doesn't matter. Yes, these things can bring you a degree of happiness in life, but all this can change tomorrow. So actually invest in your relationships, invest in the things that really matter. The things that can disappear tomorrow. So it's just changed my appreciation of life. It's changed what I look at as being important and actually less important. And I think ambition-wise, it's now not really about, can I get back and be doing live TV? Can I get to the top in any given area? It's actually, can I be the best version of myself? Can I make how many more years I've got left really count? Can I be the best possible husband to Dorina? Can I be the best dad possible to Ethan? Can I give him a fulfilling next few years before he ends up, heading out into the big wide world and leaves home? Those are the things that are really important to me. And all the other stuff, yeah, of course it plays its part, but ultimately it's relationships and the things that really matter in life that I focus in on more now than perhaps I would have done in the past.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think it's a shame when we hear the word ambition, we automatically think career, the house. And it's a shame because, like you said, those things are so important that you've mentioned, being the best dad, being the best husband, and me and the guys speak about this all the time. Actually, there's an inner desire to be a good person, a good human being. And when I changed my goal side from like chasing things, I always chased things like goal target, money targets, success in the business. And, you know, that didn't really get me anywhere. And I didn't even see success in those goals, really. I got them, but like I didn't feel any better. And for me, that was the ultimate failure. You know, when you chase something so hard and then you get it and you're like, I still feel like shit.
Yeah, yeah.
So yeah, I had to change all that to who I become. So it became about being a better son, because that caused me so much guilt, like how I behaved in my 20s, how I treated my partners. And like you say, you get these nudges, don't you? And they tell you what's important. So there's something you said here, and it stuck with me. I've wrote it down. It was, you know, you said, Lord, if you heal my wife, I'll give up work, money, everything. I'll surrender it all. I thought that was so powerful, because there's a lesson there, isn't there? It directly points us towards what's important. We lose sight so easily. We can get dragged off so quickly into chasing the wrong things. I have to catch myself every day saying, Alex, why are you working so hard?
Yeah.
Like, what are you going to do with this money? Like, why are you pushing yourself? Why are you giving up family time to do, like, I have to question this all the time. And I think your book really hit home to me about the importance of things. But I think sometimes it's easier to turn a blind eye to that, because it can be quite painful. As you well know, it's like, you know, when you love someone dearly, you are vulnerable, very vulnerable.
Yeah, totally.
And yeah, I thought it was a really powerful lesson in there in the book. Do you think that the question of like the purpose of life is a good question to ask? Do you think that takes us away from actually living it? You know, when we ask that question to ourselves, because we all do, let's face it, we all say like, why am I here? Like, what is the purpose? Do you think that stops us from living it, which is the purpose?
I think if we get too obsessed by that question, then yeah, you can lose appreciation for actually the life you've got right now and what's happening around you. I do really think that. I think it's still an amazing question to ask. But if we spend our whole time pursuing the answer and trying to make sense of everything, then, you know, you start not appreciating what's around you. And, you know, that whole thing about looking up and not looking down, looking forward and not looking back. You know, that's one of the things I try and do in life. I don't want to spend my entire life looking back and thinking back to how things were and thinking back to how life could have been so different had that not happened. That's just futile. It's going to rob me of the now. It's going to rob me of the enjoyment of the now. So I think it's a great question to ask, but don't become so obsessed by it that you actually aren't enjoying the now anymore.
Yeah, I think there's a little bit of looking back can be quite helpful, though, for me anyway. Like sometimes I need reminding of like what life can be like if you don't do the things that I spoke about earlier. So I know if I drink too much and I don't eat well and I don't train, like, you know, I feel like shit.
Yeah.
And when I feel like shit, I act very differently to when I feel good. I treat people that I love very differently to how I treat them if I feel good. So I like to look back as a little reminder and say, Alex, you could easily go back there if you take your eye off the ball. So it does help me, you know, looking back and forward, thinking about the now, but it's a hard thing to juggle, especially with ambition, career goals. You know, you want to make the most out of life, and it's knowing how to do that without taking your eye off the present.
Yeah, but I think, you know, what I was meaning it more in terms of, I think when it comes to bereavement and grief, is that we can listen, everyone handles loss in very different ways, and what's right for one person is just the next person's worst nightmare in terms of how you deal with it. I've often felt for myself is that you could spend a lot of time just kind of looking back over there and kind of wishing it hadn't happened and thinking of what life would have looked like had it not happened. And I think when you do too much of that, it robs you of actually being able to enjoy what you've got now, because life has to carry on. It might be painful, it might be difficult, it might be challenging, whatever it might be, but it has to carry on, and it will carry on. The world will keep spinning. The only question is, do you want to remain part of it or just remain in a kind of hole? And that's what I mean is, for me, it's really important that I look forward and I appreciate what I have now, is what I came back to earlier, appreciating the fact that I've had, you know, 8 more years than she had. I've, you know, got to enjoy more time with Ethan and all those kind of things. And if I'm constantly looking over my shoulder at what might have been, then I'm not really appreciating what the now is.
Yeah, no, that's totally understandable. By the way, Ethan, what a guy!
Yeah.
What a guy in that. But I smiled several times at some of the things he sounds like a little adult.
I know what he is.
Yeah, I know, but even at like 8, you're like, what an
Yeah,
incredible, where did you get that from? Unbelievable.
well, I think, listen, it's a double-edged sword, because the bottom line is you'd rather they didn't have to do this. But when children go through something traumatic in life at a young age, so if it is the loss of a parent or a sibling or someone very close, they grow up emotionally a lot, because they get taught at a very young age in a very direct way that the world can be a really unfair, cruel place, and that bad things can even happen to kids. It's not the narrative we're taught when we're reading kids books in their first few years. It's going to be fairy tales, and we were aware of less good things happening, but this kind of gate crashes in on life, and suddenly their world doesn't feel safe anymore, and they have to grow up emotionally very, very rapidly. And so I've heard it numerous times from teachers. They will talk about him being emotionally intellectual way beyond any of the peers in his class. Now, that isn't because Ethan is some sort of emotional Einstein. It's because he's had to. He's learned something about the world at a very young age. There was that period in life where, we had amazing support around us, but the day in, day out of life was just me and him. And there were times when he was kind of supporting me. There were times when he was incredibly intuitive about spotting when Dad was not in a particularly good place. So it's a double-edged sword. You wish that hadn't happened. You wish his life had remained kind of innocent and he'd have learned about bad things at a later stage. But the plus side of it is he has just this remarkable emotional intelligence that allows him to, see his friends in a certain way, pick up on things that they're going through, pick on things that other people are going through, and sometimes just be able to say the most, wise things for a 12-year-old way beyond anything I was saying at that age.
I know. Well, I couldn't believe. I mean, the way you described it just sounds so intuitive. Like, this hasn't been taught to him. Like, this is just in him. And I was reading it thinking, shit, this kid's got more emotional intelligence than I have. I'm like 37. I'm like, this lad's incredible. And it really brought a ray of sunshine to the book in that sense. You could just, his character just oozed out the book. He's the kind of lad that you want to hang around with and get to know, because he just sounds so cool. So how's he now? Like obviously he's 12 now. So what's his hobbies and interests now?
Well, he's still a Lego nut.
Is he still into his Lego nuts? Yeah.
Thought he might grow. Well, listen, it's not a bad habit to be into. Let's be honest. It's
well, Lego's changed since my day, mate. It's no longer the few basic blocks. I think there's a lot of adults still building Lego sets because they're these big phenomenal sets. I don't know much about it, but I think I know one of my friends is still into Lego and he's my age.
Yeah, and they're bloody expensive, those sets.
Yeah.
Ripping through his Christmas list today, going, flip me, more Lego. I mean, he likes his gaming and stuff. He does a bit of tennis. He's becoming quite good at the guitar. We try to encourage him to get into music. I said, take up an instrument that will impress the ladies in years to come. Guitar's a good one. So he's into that. He watches a little bit too much YouTube. We're trying to sort of get on top of that a little bit as he gets older, because he's at senior school now. So there's lots of changes that come when they go to senior school. But he's still the amazing little kid he was. But who had to measure him the other day for some out. He's like 5'1". I'm going, this is not my little boy. Well, I can't really call him my little boy anymore. But he's an amazing kid. I feel very blessed to have him. And Doreen has been such an amazing figure in his life over the last 2 or 3 years. Just become just such a key part of who he is now. And I'm really blessed to have him. He's an amazing kid.
Absolutely. So speaking about YouTube, I know this was something we discussed when we met in Stratford when we did the event. So the social media, the difficulty in managing it, because obviously it's got its pros. It's a fantastic tool, but also it has its downsides. So how do you feel about the social media now? Does it depend on your mood and state at the time? I know it does for me a lot. I view it in a positive way if I'm positive. A bit more of a negative way if I'm negative. But do you have any strategies for how you manage your time on there, how you manage your energy around it? And obviously you need to be active on it. It's quite an important part of business now and profile.
Yeah, I think with social media, it's so important to be aware, and sometimes if what you're seeing and what you're reading and what you're absorbing is taking you to a bad place, sometimes having the courage and the discipline just to say, for a little while, I'm going to take myself away from this. And I find it quite helpful every now and again just to have, maybe it's just a week, maybe just a day actually, or maybe a month. I actually did quite a few months, a couple of years ago, of just coming off it for a while. And one of the things, Alex, I've been battling with recently, which comes back to what we were talking about earlier about identity and, you know, feeling kind of times listless in terms of work and all those kind of things, is that actually social media can really fuel all those feelings, because of course one of the things that really fires social media, particularly Instagram, is comparison. We're constantly comparing our lives to other people because we see curated lives of others. We don't see everything. We see whatever snapshots people choose to share with you. But of course, the positive stuff, you know, obviously because of the world that I've worked in television, you don't need social media really to be aware of what people are doing, because you either need to switch your TV on, you turn your radio on, or read a magazine, and you'll see the people who are busy and doing stuff. And I found that recently quite hard. I found seeing former colleagues of mine busy, working lots, you know, doing another new program, whatever it might be. And when you're in that place where you're feeling quite down on yourself and thinking, I'm getting nowhere at the moment. I gave my career up to look after my boy 4 years ago, and I can't really get a foothold back in that world. I do bits and bobs, but I'm not like that person there, or that post there is so far away from where I am right now. Is that sometimes when you can feel those kind of feelings building, and that comparison is beginning to take you to quite a low place, then I find it's important for me just to take myself away from it for a bit and go, actually, I don't need to look at this. I don't need to be reminded every time I pick my phone up or have a look in the morning and see what people are up to remind myself how well things are going for that person. Because actually I know that people probably have looked that way at me in the past and gone, God, you know, he gets to cover the football for Sky. What an amazing job. Well, you know, my story is one where, well, look how quickly that can change. And that's the same for these people. I hope it doesn't, but life could change very rapidly for them. So it's about managing social media and being self-aware to know, actually, right at this point, this is not helping me at all. And if it's not helping you, having the courage and actually the discipline to say, I'm taking myself away from it for a while, and deleting the app. It doesn't mean you have to sort of come off it altogether in terms of, but you know, it might be like I'm talking to you on my desktop computer, Alex. So I know if I come off Instagram for a bit and delete the app, I could come on it here. But it's more effort to come to your desktop and look at Instagram than it is to have it on your phone. But I found that really helpful, just having a little bit of a detox, just getting away from people for a little while, not because I don't like them, because I just don't need to be reminded every 5 minutes of how well they're doing in life, because right now I'm in a bit of a bad place. And I was always like this before. 4 years ago on Sky, particularly when I did the Premier League, I had a rule, and I was actually chatting to a colleague of mine from Sky this afternoon about this whole area. And I did say to her, maybe try this, which is for 24 hours after a game, because, you know, we talked about it right at the start. Football is so opinion driven. You cannot be right on anything. You can be wrong on an awful lot. Whatever you say, someone somewhere won't like it, and they'll take issue with you. And my rule, and I was explaining this to her this afternoon, was for 24 hours after I've done a live game, I don't look at social media, particularly Twitter. I leave it alone, because actually for my own mental health, if I've had a really, really good day, everything's gone well, we've had a good game, I feel like I've got the best out of my guests, I nail my pieces to camera, all those kind of things, do I really need some oik somewhere in the UK or perhaps beyond to ruin it because they've chosen to go in on me over something? So I would leave it alone for 24 hours. And actually, when I'd had a day, like we all have them, where things haven't gone as well, I'm aware I've made a mistake, I don't need the world of social media amplifying that mistake and reminding me I've made that mistake. I already know it. So there are things like that where I was quite disciplined in just saying, right now, that's parked. I do not need to read these things. I don't need to look at them, because the best analogy I heard, because so many of us are the same, you know, and Doreen has struggled with this a little bit when people have been quite opinionated on our relationship. You know, when we got married, and I just put a very simple post up on Instagram just saying love wins. No one knew we were getting married beyond our friends and family. Yeah, there were just one or two slightly critical comments on there, but there were hundreds of lovely comments. But it's so easy, isn't it, to focus on the one or two that were negative. And I heard Stephen Fry, who was one of the original Twitterati back in the day. He said something so good on this, why it's so difficult to ignore the one or two comments. He said, social media is a little bit like being sat by this beautiful, warm, inviting swimming pool. And it looks lovely. You want to get into it and it's all good and it's lovely. And then someone does a poo in the pool. Now, this little poo is right in the corner. The rest of the pool is absolutely fine, but because of that one poo, you don't want to get in. And it's like that with social media. People, someone makes one bad comment and it colors everything else. Yeah. So I just find I have to be quite self-aware when it comes to social media and actually recognize when it's taking me to a bad place, when it's becoming unhealthy, when it's not helping me in terms of what I'm trying to do in life or in my work, and just say, for now, I choose to come away from it, and having to be quite strict about that. Not just like, oh, I'm only going to look at my phone twice a day. So take it off your phone.
No, absolutely. Yeah, I think anytime you're trying to make something, anytime you're trying to tear down a bad habit, I like to make inconvenient. So you're right, it is inconvenient to go on your desktop versus your phone. And it's convenient to go on your phone. That's why it's so hard. So the problem is it's such a habit just to click the button that if it's on the phone, even if you're trying hard not to go on it, you're going to go on it. It's habit. You don't think, you just go. So yeah, I use all those strategies to good use, but I really like your style of coming off. I think it's recommended that everyone does that for a mental break. But you're right, I think comparison is inevitable. So, you know, I was on your Instagram today doing a bit of research, and you're right, you just view everyone else's life as better than your own. It's just what happens on socials, you're right. But there is, like you say, there will be people going on your page. Like I was there today admiring what you do and you know, your qualities as a dad and things like that. After reading your book, you know, admiration does go up. But I think you can use it as a pro or con. So I can look at you now as an inspiration, or I can look at you as someone who's got a better life than me. I think it depends how you view it.
Yeah,
so, you know, I think most men would want to be a good dad.
Yeah.
And that's clearly important to you. So inspiration there, if you choose it to be inspiration, or it can be poison. One of the reasons I don't go on Twitter is I think it's poison. That is the worst. It's the most negative. I went on one day years ago. I haven't been on for years since. I haven't been on the Facebook news feed for a long time. I've got the blocker there. And yeah, I delete the Instagram app. I have to. It's like eating, you know, you have to be careful what you put in your body. None more so than social media. I think it's evident. But look, they've got the best psychologists working at Facebook and at Instagram. So I don't think you're going to win that battle without some brute.
No, but there's other things like, you know, I think just for me personally, I find this is helpful, and that is that my phone at the end of the day goes in the utility room downstairs. It doesn't come with me to the bedroom. I sometimes get frustrated. Rena, she said, I need it for my alarm clock in the morning. So we can buy a very cheap alarm clock. It'll do the same thing. It will wake you up. But just things like that, because that for me is not a healthy way to finish the day. And it's not a particularly healthy way to start the day. So what's the best way of doing that? We'll put it somewhere where you're going to have to walk down the stairs to go and get it.
Yeah, no, it's funny you say that.
Stretch your arm out.
Yeah. I just bought a no frills alarm clock, and my rule now is do not take my phones to bed with me, because I was getting into this terrible habit, 3 a.m., you know, wide awake, and I'm like, well, what should I do? I'll tell you what, I've got on my phone.
Let's make myself even more awake by looking at a bright screen.
It's fucking stupid. Like, you know what you're doing, and then you complain that you're tired the next day. It's just it's just absolutely insane. So yeah, when we look at things like depression, anxiety, it certainly doesn't help. With anxiety there, so when we did the event those years back in Stratford, you know, Paul, yourself, and I, we all had a little bit of anxiety that day. I could tell we were all a bit nervous. There was a bit of nervous energy. But that proved in the long run to be something quite useful. You know, we did something good. We raised money for charity. We delivered a good event and a good talk. How much of anxiety do you think can be turned into a positive? So, for example, if you were to go out and try something completely out of your comfort zone, I'm guessing there would be an element of anxiety there, which could lead to something fruitful. If we avoid anxiety, we might stay in that comfort zone, that dreaded comfort zone for our life. So, like, how do you manage the balance between getting enough anxiety in your life versus none, therefore I don't do anything and don't try anything?
Yeah, that's another great question, mate, because I had a really interesting episode last week. So I do a few games every year for Prime Video, some Premier League games. and the package they bought, Sky and BT get the vast majority of the games, but once a year over Christmas, Amazon Prime gets a load of Premier League games. And so it was my way back into football last season. I started doing a few games to them over Christmas, and there were a few more because of COVID and all broadcasters having to pick up extra live games because of no crowds. There were more that went into the year. And I hadn't done a game last November for 3.5 years before everything happened. So I ultimately didn't know, one, if I could still do it, two, if the anxiety and the depression and the panic attacks that were affecting me so profoundly 3.5 years before were going to come back. And none of that did. My first game was a game at Crystal Palace, and I was fine. And every game after that, I was absolutely fine. And then last week comes, my first game is actually doing my own team, Norwich, away to Newcastle. Then I had a game at Old Trafford last Thursday, Manchester United against Arsenal. And I've been sort of thinking and reflecting on this week, thinking, can I discover what the trigger point was? Because this horrendous anxiety came back literally out of nowhere. And you'll know this, anxiety often doesn't make sense. Sometimes it does. I had a lot of anxiety on Blue Peter when I was parachute jumping. I thought I was going to, cruise it. In the end, had a really bad opening and had a huge amount of anxiety after that when we were filming me doing skydives in San Diego. But you look at that and go, well, that's not
makes sense.
You can understand why you're feeling anxious about that. Your trigger point is staring out of a plane at 14,500 feet and someone opens the door and you jump. I can see that. But last week, there really wasn't really an explanation for it. I hadn't had a difficult time at home. Last year wasn't a nightmare. All the games have been thoroughly enjoyable, and yet suddenly this anxiety came in. And in the end, it became a fuel. Now, I'm being honest, I really wish I hadn't gone through that last week. I wish the anxiety had not been there. I wish I could just gone and do my work and enjoy it. And yeah, have that little bit of healthy adrenaline, that little shot of nerves before you go on air to keep you sharp and focused and good at your job. The rest of it, I really wish I didn't have. But actually, it did provide the fuel to do my work in a way that perhaps I'm not sure I would have done it had I not had it, because I just had this crippling anxiety in so much as I was having to tell myself as I walked out my hotel room in Newcastle last Thursday to head to Manchester to do United against Arsenal, literally having to have an audible out loud in my room, not just randomly around the hotel conversation with myself, reminding myself why I was good enough to do this, why I can do this, and I am going to do this. So the easiest thing would have been, and I had that moment on the phone to Irina, I said, I cannot do this. I can't leave the room. I can't go and do this. But it kind of provided that fire to have that conversation to then go, right, there is no sodding way I'm not doing this. I'm going to go and prove to myself and others who know I'm struggling at the moment that I have the strength to go and do this. But the honest answer is, mate, I'd rather that wasn't accompanying those 2 games last week. I mean, I've got a couple more games after Christmas. I hope that's not the story again. But if it is, I know that within me, even when I have quite overpowering anxious thoughts, there's still that strength and resolve to go, but I can still deal with this.
Yeah, absolutely. And there was a story when you were in Old Trafford, I think a similar thing happened. And then you went on finally and your boss said, it's the best we've seen you. This was straight after a meltdown in the toilet at Old Trafford. And then your boss is saying, you were phenomenal. You were fantastic. Do you think there's a danger, though, that, when we keep pushing ourselves to do things past the point of anxiety, so it's so draining, it requires so much effort that can only be a short-term strategy before, like, we just say, I can't physically, not mentally, just physically can't do it anymore. And this is something that keeps coming up on the podcast side. Like, how much of this do you feel like is predetermined, like is beyond your control, versus now actually looking back, I can handle this better? Like, do you have a grasp of that? Do you feel like it's in control, or do you feel like it's not?
No, I mean, I didn't last week. I felt everything was kind of cartwheeling quite rapidly, and you get into that horrible area of catastrophizing everything, where you're just thinking worst case scenario in every single area. Worst case scenario, I cock up my first piece of camera, because we don't have auto cue on the football. You don't really need it, but you're going to need to remember pieces of the camera, just these various junction points in a build up that you're going to need to remember. So you catastrophize and go, I'm just going to mess it up. I'm going to call the guest the wrong name. I'm going to ask completely the wrong question. I'm going to have a moment that ends up being all over social media. You literally catastrophize every single moment of what you're about to do. And yet sometimes you'd have to stop, and I'd stop myself and I'd think back and go, but I did this I've been in broadcasting for 20 years, and go to myself, name me one time where any of these things happened. Yeah, occasionally you've had a bad day and you did forget your words, or you asked the wrong question, but there's these catastrophic thoughts of things going majorly wrong. How many times have they ever happened? And the reality was they hadn't. It never happened. But when you're in that place, everything suddenly becomes overwhelming. And when I was chatting to Darina about it, when she was sort of helping me through it, she said, what does this mean for you long term? It's always like this. And I said, if this is my experience of doing this every time, I couldn't keep doing it long term, because I think it's too physically and mentally draining. Yeah, it's okay having that safety net, which is when I go on air, everything's fine. All those feelings I had on the Thursday morning in Newcastle, when we went on air at 7:30, pitch side at Old Trafford with Patrice Evra, Thierry Henry and Alan Shearer, 3 massive names from the game of football, absolutely fine. And I loved it. And you came away and you think, what on earth was all that about earlier? What on earth was it all about? And I said to Darina the other day, I said, that cannot be my experience every time. So for me, it's about trying to understand. I went to see my doctor. I'm going to sort of pick things up with my counsellor, because what I want to do, Alex, is understand what's behind this. Where's this coming from? When these moments come, how can I better manage myself? Because yeah, it can partly fuel you, but it can also absolutely drain you. And I don't want that to be my experience every time I do it. So I've got to get a better handle on it, because I don't want to run away from it and go, well, anxiety's won the day here, because I love doing it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I've seen people shrink their world down to 4 walls because they don't want to experience anxiety. Yeah. It's understandable, but it does eliminate a lot of options in the world. But I think there's a theory, and this is the same with sleep, when people say they can't sleep. And I experience this. It's almost like you don't sleep because you fear not sleeping. Yeah. You have a panic attack because you fear you might have a panic attack. And it's a hard cycle to break. That's the fear. Oh shit, I'm gonna have an anxiety attack. And it's that fear that triggers the anxiety, which totally makes sense to me. Some people think it's ridiculous, but I can see how the fear of having a panic attack could bring on panic.
Well, it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy, isn't it? I remember the night of my wedding back in July, as I sort of strolled to the bedroom thinking, I really want to get a good night's sleep here. My mind straight away went, you're going to struggle to sleep here. Lo and behold, I reckon I got 2 hours sleep. Because your mind's saying, you're not going to sleep, you're not going to sleep. And then you think, oh, but I must sleep. And then suddenly all the cogs are turning, and lo and behold, you don't. So it's about retraining your brain in a different way to not do that. But it's a really tough challenge. And I think long term, if I keep getting anxiety around doing live football, I do not want to be someone who just shrinks away from it and goes, I can't do it anymore. I want to try and find a way of managing it and actually in time lessening it. And when you have those moments, you think, oh, crikey, I might get the anxiety again in this game, that doesn't therefore instantly press the switch on all that happening like you were just talking about.
So I'm going to do what I always do and be really cynical here for a moment, if I can. What is the possibility that this is more like a nature versus nurture thing? So I've seen some people really battle certain difficulties in their personalities and their life, and we get into this conversation. I spoke with a guy last week who had bipolar, and he said it was, I couldn't help the way I behaved. So my argument was, well, that means free will is an illusion. We don't have control over our biology. We don't have control. Does that ever play on your mind that, like, fuck, this is in me, this is not something I can control? Because we're brought up in an environment and social that we can't control as a young person. We're placed in the environment. We're not asked to be there. Do you ever think about this, whether it's nature versus nurture, and whether it's something we can handle or whether it's with us as human beings?
A little bit, yeah, because I had to do a lot of trying to work this all out in a little bit I unpacked in the book, working out where my first wife falling ill, that horrendous period of anxiety and panic attacks and depression had come from. And there was a period where I looked at it and thought, it's just illogical. There's no real explanation. It's just something that happens, and it happened to me, and it's, you know, it's part of probably who I am, even though I've never had it before. And as time went on, I began to unpack it with my counselor, and just through the passage of time, thinking about it more and more, is that I think it was, a lot of it was nurture. And that is that you don't recognize that every time you do a job that is going to fill you with a shot of adrenaline every time you go on air. It's really not saying my job's really important, because it's not. But that kind of fear of fucking up that comes with live television means there's going to be those healthy nerves every time you go on air. There's going to be that shot of adrenaline and a lot of kind of different pressures that you're not always aware of. So I did struggle on the Premier League, particularly at Sky, that kind of imposter syndrome, feeling like I shouldn't really be here. I'm sat in a studio with guys who've won multiple trophies in the world of football. They played at the very highest level. I don't really feel that I should be in their company. But of course, I'm there as a presenter. I'm not there as a fellow midfielder. You know, I had every right to be there. And if I wasn't there, they wouldn't be allowed to shine, because they'd have no one to control the show. So it wouldn't look any good anyway. But you have those pressures that build up, that fear of, as I talked about earlier, getting things wrong and everyone seeing it. And if you don't recognize those and you don't deal with those, I think what happened for me over time is they just kind of almost silently built up. So that at the start of that 2017, 2018 season, everything just begins to fall apart, because I'd never managed how I was feeling. I'd never recognized that these were really big stress points. If I don't recognize them and deal with them, at some point will catch up with me. Now, some people might say, well, you're just predisposed to being anxious. You know, let's look at your family history. Your mum has a history of anxiety. Your mum's mum, which she does, has a history of anxiety on my mum's side of the family. So this is nature. This is part of, you know, your DNA. Actually, no, because I've never been an anxious person. You know, I never had problems on Blue Peter and all the daredevil stuff we did. Skydiving aside, but that was just because of a bad opening. Did some nut stuff, you know, some stuff that, you know, would scare the living daylights out of most people. No anxiety problems with that. So actually, no, that's not to do with the nature of my mum's family. I think a lot of it was down to, in my case, nurture in the environment I'd spent so much time in. And eventually various things have built up that I had never recognized. I'd never managed because I didn't understand them. And then because I wasn't dealing with them, they all began flowing out in that period in 2017. So I think it's a little bit of both. But for me, I think a lot of it was nurture. And actually, speaking to a lot of people about this, you know, I had an amazing message. I can't, you know, in fairness to them, confidentiality reasons, won't say it was, but, you know, I put a post up on Instagram last week. I was just really honest, as saying that I really struggled with anxiety around these 2 games this week. And I had loads of amazing messages, lots of people encouraging, lots of people also being very open and honest, saying this is something I go through. And I had an amazing message directly from a guy who's really at the top of his game. If you hear him, you're just going to think this is a guy who's got everything together, and he's brilliant at what he does. It's so good. And yet he says, ahead of every game, I struggle with anxiety. I struggle with that feeling I'm not good enough, that I shouldn't really be here. And I thought, my goodness me, you know, here's this guy, and he's going through something exactly the same. So I think a lot of it comes out of this particular place that in which I've worked for many, many years, which is if you don't recognize the stress points, then eventually they have the potential to overwhelm you.
Yeah, I hope you're right in that sense, that it is more nurture. It's a far more positive way of looking at things, because it means we're in control of that.
Yeah,
you're right, and it's so good to hear that this guy on the top of his game is struggling as well, because that's a relief when you hear that. I mean, I experienced it many times myself when we stepped on the stage together. I was so close to. I thought, well, I tell you what, I'll just introduce Simon and Paul. I won't say anything, because I had those exact same feelings. Like,
yeah,
on stage with Paul Morton, Simon Thomas, Blue Peter, Sky Sports. I was like, I've never spoken to anybody in public. What am I doing here? It was, and for weeks beyond. But again, it was kind of proof that, you know, on the other side of that resistance, there was a lot of growth. Yeah. So yes, it's not always a battle that you want to step out of. It's something that you want to step into. But I guess there is a fine line. But you know, you don't want it to destroy you.
No.
Yeah. So there's methods, I guess, of of dealing with it, which it sounds like is your mission now. It's to find out, and like you say, the trigger points. Why? For me, like going on live TV sounds horrendously stressful. Like you're live in front of a lot of people. It's like it makes total logic sense to me why you might be slightly anxious at that point.
Yeah, and also it's very different to how it used to be because nothing gets missed anymore. You know, TV, when I first started on Blue Peter, which was 1999, you know, there was, I mean, Sky Plus was still 2 or 3 years away at this point. And social media wasn't, you know, I had a blissful 6 years on Blue Peter in the pre-social media age. I mean, Facebook sort of emerged towards the end of my time on the show, but that was it. And now kind of everything's instantaneous. So, you know, there's moments when I was, before all this technology, you'd hear a presenter on the telly say something and you knew it was wrong or that had been really badly mispronounced. But you go, did you really just say that? And unless you were recording it on a VHS tape, there was no way you could go back and find out, did he just actually say that? Now you just go, flip, pause, rewind. No, he did say that. Oh, while I'm at it, let's take a screen grab. Bang. And you can have a clip up within 2 minutes of someone making a mess of something. It's that quick. And it does put extra pressure on you. It's not about saying before all this, you had the freedom just to be rubbish. You didn't. And people could still write into points of view, but that took effort. Now you can go viral off a mistake. And it will go everywhere in minutes. And that's you know, it is an additional pressure. And, you know, I'll tell a funny story. I was on Sky Sports News and I was saying the team Stockport County and total, you know, honest mistake. But I dropped the O from county. We obviously, you know how that's going to sound. It was on YouTube within 20 minutes. I think it was out there, and it's still there. If you want to look it up, it's still there.
Oh, no.
But you know, nothing's missed. Everything's heard, and if anything's heard and it is seen, it's reposted and it's amplified. So something that was kind of a throwaway moment that lots of people didn't really realize had happened gets amplified 100-fold.
Absolutely. I mean, back in the day, I used to remember watching something, I think it was called All Right on the Night. And it was
it's
brilliant. But like you say, that was it. Like you'd see it once and then you'd move on and you'd forget all about it. Whereas now it's viral. So logically, you can step back and you can see why that might be a real added pressure and make somebody anxious or stressed. Like it makes total logical sense, doesn't it? When you break it down like that. It's a high pressured job. One of the things I've always said is one of my things I always want to avoid, and I never will be, but being famous would be my worst nightmare. The pressure, even being noticed outside, just doing regular things. I think it's all added pressure, and sometimes people just want to escape. And I think the higher the profile you have, the harder that becomes. And I don't think that's healthy either. That's a difficult thing, especially after suffering something like you did. Like that's the time where you just want to be left alone. And in the public eye, that's not always welcomed or accepted.
No. I mean, it's had its plus points. You know, it's had an awful lot of amazing support from total strangers after everything happened. But then was it's a weird one. People knowing stuff about you that if you weren't in the public eye, they wouldn't know. Do you know what I mean? So you feel like a lot more people know things that they wouldn't have necessarily known otherwise. But that is part, you know, if you choose to go into this kind of area, you have to accept that's part of it. It was never my motivating factor. The reason why I wanted to work on Blue Peter is because I thought I was a half decent presenter and this was the best kids show to work on, and it was. But beyond that, the fame thing titillated me, interested me, was quite surreal and weird for probably about 6 months. And after that, I just wasn't that bothered by it. Kept the same set of friends, didn't really hang out in the places you might expect someone off the telly to hang out in. But it was always a weird thing, you know, people just knowing who you were and just coming out and saying, why are you in Tesco's? Why wouldn't I be in Tesco's? I need to eat like you. Do you think I'm slightly, you know, somehow different? Whereas now people come up and they're often so really nice. They'll, how you doing? Often it's, how's your boy doing and stuff. But it's weird. So many people know.
Have your cooking skills improved since the?
Vastly, yes. I'm the main. I cook more. I mainly cook now because she's in London 5 days a week. So yeah, I'm light years away from what I was when everything happened. Ethan said he could cook barbecues and omelets, and that was it.
So I can't let you go with just asking you about the power of faith, really, the faith in the Christian world, in God. Like, it sounded like it was a very important part of your life. Does that still play a big role in your day-to-day living and how you feel and think going forward?
Yeah. I mean, it was a massive wrestle with it all when everything happened. It's the same. I think whether you have a faith or you don't, when something really crap happens in life, we want answers. We want to know why it happened, what does it mean, why me, all these kind of things. And I actually do think in some ways, when something really difficult happens, having a faith in some ways makes it more difficult because you're searching for answers in a place that if you have no faith, you're not looking for those answers. It's just, well, the world could be shit. That's it. But if you have a faith, then you're going to be directing those questions at God, and you're not always going to get the answers you're looking for. So a lot of my wrestle in the first 18 months after Gemma died was like, well, where are you, God? I thought you were a God of love and justice and all these kind of things, and yet you've left me and my boy in this place. I've lost my career as a result of it. Everything's fallen apart. So what's this all about? But it's kind of quite cathartic. It was kind of like that searching for meaning, searching for actually what is faith all about. During that period, I found really helpful, and I drew a lot of kind of strength from it. And so it's still a really, really important part of who I am. It's, something that's very important to Dorina and I. We both share the same faith. So it's, I kind of describe it as the kind of, what the heck is that thing? In a yacht, the thing that goes down through the keel.
You're asking the wrong person.
Yeah, but people saying things, but it's the thing that keeps the boat balanced. Basically, right. Without it, the boat keels over. It just won't go anywhere. It's like a thin, as in THIN. And that's how I describe faith. It's like without that, life for me would just be all over the shop. It's the kind of thing that keeps me anchored, keeps me with a sense of perspective, a sense of meaning. And it's something that's really important to my boy as well. I'm part of a really lovely church here in Buckinghamshire. So I think something like this could have easily gone the other way. I could have easily gone, do you know what, this isn't for me anymore. It's just,
totally understandable. I feel a bit guilty. I only turn to my faith in God when things are at their worst. So it's a bit like the parent thing right there. Obviously some people blame their parents for and everything. And somebody says to me, look, if you're going to blame your parents for all your faults, you better credit them for all the positives and the goodness in you. Yeah. And I feel the same with God. Like, yes, like God, look at all the terrible things that are going on in the world, but don't forget to look at the other side. And that's probably where I need to improve myself, the gratitude aspect of life.
Yeah, totally. Couldn't agree with you, mate.
Yeah, it's important, isn't it? And when we talk about mental health, to spin it round and have a look at some of the good things that are happening, because we're all guilty of that sometimes. We have a look at what.
Totally.
Simon Thomas, you've been an amazing guest. It's been an absolute privilege to speak to you, and I'm so grateful for you giving up your time. I think you're a great guy, very inspirational.
Thanks, mate. Likewise. And I'm gonna, if nothing else comes out of this, I'm going to get me arse down the gym more.
Hey, you've got my number. Give me a text. Say, Alex, nag the shit out of me for a few weeks. Make sure I'm fit and active, and I'll certainly do that for you. No problem. No problem.
Man.
Simon, thanks so much. I appreciate you. Good luck with the future and everything.
Thank you, mate.
What to do next? Thank
God
you,
bless.
mate.
Take care, mate. Bye-bye.